What's up, everyone? It's Carday23 here, and today is the second episode of essentially the intro to Pokemon VGC and competitive Pokemon battling. And in my first video, I kind of touched over some pretty basic things, just like a general overview of like what Pokemon VGC is. And this is another one that I felt like I really needed to explain, and we'll kind of go into what the episode would be next week as far as like building teams and using your resources to build teams. So essentially, something that's very important and something that's always been a thing in whatever game that you might play online, either competitively or not, is that tournament rules and things like that differ from typically like ranked and stuff like that, except for in the case of Magic, where Magic Arena does have best of three and best of one. But essentially, best of one is taking like one game, decides the whole match essentially, and best of three is usually best two out of three, and in certain cases can be just first to two wins. Very rarely do you have games just end in draws and things like that, and technically means that you could end up playing like 4 or 5 games, depending on how things play out and things like that, and that is something that can definitely happen. But anyway, enough rambling about non-Pokemon stuff. Here, best of one. I've broken both of them down just into very general terms. One game decides the match, unless obviously it ends in a draw. Then you would just play another game, and then whoever eventually wins ends up winning that match. There is no other game, which if somehow it ends up being a draw, it kind of beats like best of one, because then you kind of get more into like best of three and can change things up and change your strategy and things like that. But typically, usually one game does decide the whole match. Um, it is more luck based than best of three, and I'll explain that when I go over the best of three part, because as you can see, I think best of three is definitely more skill based. Teams tend to be more powerful and versatile than best of three teams. So in best of one, generally, like you just use like the best Pokemon that are available to you in the rule set that you are able to use. Essentially, then like you just use like more high synergy teams, or just Pokemon that are just very powerful on their own, that can just kind of carry like the team's weight on their back and things like that, versus like the more versatile teams that you would see in like best of three. We're not saying that like using a team full of like really strong Pokemon isn't going to be good enough for best of three. Just in like best of three, you're probably going to focus in on like one strategy, maybe like backdoor into a second one, where like teams in like best of one uh, pretty reliably run 2 to 3 different sets and game plans that you can use depending on like the potential of what teams you could see, just because you have no idea what teams you could see and you don't want to necessarily lose to a bad matchup just because your team has an inability to kind of flex itself into like these different sort of archetypes, things like that. Thankfully, best of one is generally just used on the ranked online ladder, which again kind of sucks because that's like one of the best ways to practice besides like practicing with like friends and things like that, is just getting on the online ladder and battling against somebody. You're stuck only battling once, and you have to do a little bit more studying rather than like play testing like certain matchup or how good like certain Pokemon could be, given the matchup, whether it's facing like a Trick Room team, any of the various like weather teams, some of the teams that like try to abuse terrain, things like that. Just things to keep in mind, that if you do play best of one, you solely only play best of one, and you try to transition to tournaments, which are more likely to be best of three, that you're gonna have to do a lot more studying and probably a lot more playing and changing up your approach to play testing if you're generally just a best of one player rather than a best of three player. Transitioning to that, like best of three, obviously is best two out of three or first to two wins. Obviously, if you somehow get a draw and there's still time left in the round to finish said matches, best of three is typically more skill based than best of one, mainly because there is like you if you lose game one, you have a chance to just kind of change up your strategy, change up your approach. Maybe you've seen some things that aren't typical from like certain Pokemon you might see, or they're just doing things that you wouldn't expect. And basically for game 2, and then hopefully for your case game 3, if you lose, that you can kind of like change up your strategy. And then also from the person on like the winning side, it essentially like puts the pressure on them to adapt as well. And like just because you got your leads right, or maybe like they missed a move that had like a 5 or 10% chance to miss, sometimes in Pokemon even like a 20% chance to miss, or they just miss a move like 2 or 3 times in a row, like you're just like, oh well, I lost the game because I missed a move. And like best of one, where that totally can happen, where you play perfectly, you have your opponent on the ropes, then you miss a move that was like 95% accurate and just lose the game. Sometimes that's just how it goes, and that can obviously happen in multiple games of best of 3, but it's less likely to happen if you play more games. And the inverse of it also is that you might be likely to miss if you say you use the move like 10 times over the course of 2 or 3 games. But generally, best of 3 is more skill based for the fact that you do get to make those adjustments after game 1. You get to change up your leads. You get to change up like how you approach the matchup just in general. And that of course goes for both sides. Like maybe even if you won, you have the chance to change up your lead. You're not stuck having to lead the same Pokemon or bring in the same 4 Pokemon. That's why in usually the VGC doubles format, you bring 6 but pick 4, and obviously you can change those up and things like that. Teams are usually tooled towards certain or expected Pokemon. Generally, I think competitive Pokemon and like other competitive things in general, Magic just being the one that I'm the most familiar with. Usually, there's like one of two people. There's either the person that is just going to bring or I guess there's technically 3, but normally there's someone who's going to bring the very best team that has like the most synergy, that also includes like the most powerful Pokemon that fit into those synergies, that basically are the best at doing what they do. There is like counter strategy or counter meta like picks, where it's like if you expect to see like Incineroar a lot if you're playing Pokemon, like, or if you're playing Magic and it's like the Omnath decks and things like that, you're probably very likely to decide that if the majority of the meta of people that show up are going to use a certain Pokemon, or a set of Pokemon, or in Magic's case playing like a set of like cards and things like that, you're probably very likely to play a strategy that counters that gives you a better overall matchup against that, for the fact that if you think you're going to play it enough to be able to top cut in that field, and also have game against some of the other strategies that are going around, essentially just makes it a very tantalizing pick for a team, and how you decide like what Pokemon to put on your team. And as I was saying before, with like best of 1, best of 3 is generally more tournament settings, mainly because if you play like best of 1, there's like a good and bad for it. The good is that it definitely gives players with like a lower skill, I think, a higher chance of beating players that have just generally more skill than them and more experience than them. Mainly because like in best of 1, like, yeah, there is the chance that like you still just get run over by someone that's better than you, but like you could have like the right lead against their lead. They miss a move, maybe you hit a move that's not very accurate, that just kind of like blows up their whole plan. Things like that. And obviously, like, you just have to win one game, and if you beat the best player in the world in best of 1, that is still like an amazing feat, but it's less amazing than if you do it in like best of 3, which I think like the scale there, like if you're like an average player versus a worse player, or versus a better player, that generally it's better to beat them in best of 3, right? Because you're able to make the adjustments, they're able to make adjustments, and just kind of go at it and attack like the matchups in a different way, using different moves, or just bringing different Pokemon. So that's really it. Just breaking down best of 1 and best of 3 for Pokemon. again, like it's negligible, honestly, especially with how things are now. Uh, I think if you are generally just an online ladder player that like using some of the other tools and things like that I'm gonna be going over in another video to essentially prepare yourself for tournament settings and things like that, that you definitely want to watch out for that video and just kind of use this as like a reference, explaining like best of one versus best of three, which is something that is a huge deal and doesn't seem like it would be different until you actually start playing in tournaments and then you realize that like best of one is just a way different metagame than what best of threes end up shaking out to be, because in best of three you definitely want more consistency versus higher power with less consistency. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like on it. Subscribe to the channel to see more Pokemon VGC breakdowns, content, along with Magic the Gathering, and some other just random stuff that I just posted out the week. Be sure also to subscribe to the other channel that I post to, Dark Titan Enterprises, where not only myself but a bunch of other content creators occasionally stream and post other videos just for the entertainment of the people, and there are a lot of really cool people, so be sure to check them out. That's going to do it for me in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next one.